the UK. I'm a data strategist. I work with government, civil society, and businesses around their data use. I'm also the chair of Open Data Kosovo, which is weird because I'm not for Kosovo, but I'm very inspired every time I work with them to see what is done. And I'm about to speak to you a bit about data and economy. I have slides. They're going to be of pictures, so don't worry. And hopefully I'll make it short. So let's start. Speaking of economy and looking around us and what is going on, I think it would be really good to start with the sentence, data is the new oil. Did anyone hear about this? Raise your hand. Who heard this? Data is the new oil. Great. There's one problem. Data is not oil. It's not even remotely the new oil. This phrase was coined by Clive Humby, which is a mathematician in the UK in 2006. And since then, we know a thing or two why it's not the new oil for economy. Firstly, data is not finite. Oil and gas are. As long as there are humans or even robots, we keep producing data. Actually, we're probably producing too much data any second of the day, okay? So unlike oil, we have too much data. So maybe data is the new renewable energy, okay? But the thing is that it's also not renewable energy. Like, I don't know if you know that, but we can't store a lot of renewable energy now. We can store a bit, but not as much as we need in order to fight, for example, the energy crisis, right? We store tons of data, as I said, because we produce a lot of it. It's cheap for us to even store this data. So it's not renewable energy. And also, let's think about a bit about this. Does anyone have an example for data that, like for business, that doesn't have to rely on data? Almost all business have to rely on electricity and water and heating, but not on data. Example from someone? I'm trying to make it more interactive because it's like really, it's after lunch. Blerta, do you have an example?
Car fixing.
Yep, fixing your car doesn't rely on data. Hairdressing doesn't rely on data. So if we want to boost the economy, we don't really need data, we need people. Data can be a catalyst to a lot of other stuff. Yes, we can create lots of businesses based on data. There's not many examples actually to give, but we can. It's not impossible. But actually, if we're looking at economy, in a healthy economy, we need to use data in a smart and calculated move as an investment of how to produce better businesses. Not just create data for the sake of creating it and wait for something to come, which is what happens a lot when we're thinking about data. People think that, oh, if we can ask people what's their name and their gender and what they bought lately and maybe collect this cookie or another, we can give them an ad that can help them, that can help us to get revenue. Or government say, we're just going to release this data and maybe someone else will use it. Maybe a business, maybe they can create an opportunity. In reality, that's not what happened. In reality, we have a lot of waste and not a lot of economic impact when we're speaking about SMEs, like small to medium enterprises, or when we're thinking about the big pictures. Yes, we have tech giants, we have a lot of high-tech industry, but actually when we speak of government and cooperation, it's still not there. Not only in this area, everywhere. So in my talk today, I want to bring a couple of examples, one of them from Israel, where I'm working with the Israeli government, and the second one is from England, to show you different types of how you create value from data and boost the economy at the same time in ways that you might have not thought about. So slide, please. Ta-da! This project in Israel looks very nice with all these graphs, but there's something very big behind it. In 2018, the Israeli government decided to do a project around social services, meaning try to understand who operates social services and how you can create better social services for citizens. The economic benefit of it is big. If you help the most vulnerable in society to become better, to actually create more value, you can boost them, right? They can be an active part in the economy. You can make sure that everything is happening. But it's even more than just looking at the vulnerable people of society that we're helping. Israel, like a lot of other countries, is outsourcing its social services, right? So if you know who you are outsourcing to, then you can try to make more competition, create better services, not only rely on one sole trader to help you. So what the Israeli government had to do is actually to understand where all these people are. They started with a simple question: who provides services across the board? What are their characteristics? How we can create better services? So what they've done here is basically creating their own data standard for social services, okay? Social services are being procured in government procurement, but there is no government procurement standard for social services. There is a big one named open contracting for all procurement reasons, not for social services. So that's the point. So they had to manually collect data around social services from 3 different departments. I'll show you. So one of them is the Ministry of Social Care, Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Health. So you can actually see that the big social services money goes to welfare, right? So it's the same here. Service budget by operator, welfare, education, health. And you can see the differences between them. Now, it's very important to know when we speak about social services and operators, we don't only speak about businesses. We speak about NGOs, okay? There's a lot of NGOs that provide social services, which is important. Because usually you think of NGO of someone who's doing work for free. But in Israel and in other places, they also provide services. So here you can see, for example, that most of the money go to operators who are both an NGO and a business, which is in the purple one. But if you look here, sorry for the Hebrew, this part I couldn't translate into English. So you see that NGOs are in yellow, business are in orange, and this is what happened when I read Hebrew. It's really hard to speak English then. And then you have combined in purple. You can see that most of the money actually go to NGO, like most of the contracts go to NGOs. Yes, most of the money is not going to NGOs, you see? So that's important. It means that NGOs are operating a lot of small services and not getting a lot of money, yet a lot of combined services are getting more money, meaning they have more wealth. It's also interesting, it's also good to know what services NGOs are giving in order to regulate everything. So this can help us to understand, is there corruption somewhere? Maybe we're giving one operator too many services and we can dig into it. But most of all, it can help us to basically give it to more operators to be part of this economy of social care, which a lot of people don't know about. So it's give all of these opportunities, but it can only be done, this thing, if you know what the questions that you want to answer and how. If you want to know what all are the social services in Israel, then you have to create it, okay? We had to do it manually. But then something miraculously happened. So this happened at the Prime Minister's office. They created this data set. And then a different ministry, the Ministry of Justice, decided they want to create an app, okay, by the Freedom of Information Act, of all of the social services that are given in Israel. Israel is not a big country. It's 9 million people. Not a lot of services, 220 by government. So what happened is that an NGO decided to take this data and create this. Why is it not working? This. This is a map that is based on the data that you just showed, that basically show you all of the services that are given in Israel. Now, it's still a beta, but the idea of it is to take government data, NGO data, maybe even business data, to understand what are the services that people can get next to you. Imagine you want to know what is the mental health services that you need because you have a family member in need, or maybe you need it. Today, in Israel, you have to Google and then maybe try to find. This will help you to know what's around you and where, so you can see everything. And it will help you know, is this an NGO that gives it to me? Is this the government? Do I need to pay money? Do I don't need to pay money? It can only be done if there's a standard of data that you already know about. This is, for example, Beersheba, which is a city there where it's at 208. Okay, Israel is mainly in the center. Jerusalem is there, it's like 604 because it's the second area. North of Israel doesn't have a lot of people, and Beersheba is mostly a desert. But it has a bit of services. So now, if I want to know what are the services for me as a citizen, I can just go to this map, to Beersheba, and find all the services that I need. That help me as a citizen But it also helped me as a service provider to put it out there so people will know it's there. If I can empower citizens to become better, I can boost my economy, in my opinion. Also thinking that all of these services are for vulnerable people, women who need to know about a shelter, people with mental health disabilities who need to know how they can get help. This is really important. So this is one map and one need that was coming, that when you have a strong case of what you want to do with the data, and you as the body that collects it know how to use it, others can use it then well, because it's in quality and it's working well and it's going. But this is descriptive statistics. I'm going to show you something completely different from England. Does anyone know what this is? What does it look like? Come on, it's after lunch. Someone tell me. Cells. Great. This is a brain cell. Good, well done. This is a brain slide. I work part-time for Parkinson's UK, which is the biggest Parkinson's foundation in the UK, charity, that supports people with Parkinson's. Parkinson's disease, it's not a disease that it's easy to diagnose, okay? The idea of Parkinson's is that you can't find it in a CT, you can't find it in MRI. Parkinson's is the lack of dopamine in the brain. It's happened in the stem of the brain. In order to know that you actually had Parkinson's today, you have to do an autopsy of your brain and find it out. In Parkinson's UK, we are very lucky to have the only Parkinson's brain bank in the world. If you're queasy about body points, I'm very sorry. But what we're doing is that we ask people to donate their brain, either healthy or people with Parkinson's, and then we're basically dissecting it into small, small slices, not me, like the researchers, and then we make it into a slide, okay, which is very important. The slide then go under the microscope, and they need a neuropathologist, okay, someone who is a pathologist but also understand how the brain works, to basically understand where is the Parkinson's. That work takes 8 hours in a good day, okay, and needs to be done twice. Because in order to verify Parkinson's, you have to basically make sure that someone looked at your work and it was okay. So in total, 16 hours. These brain slides are very heavy in data. We have a lot of them. From each brain, we have around, I think, 1,000 slides, okay? And they're all over. It's, what happened? Did I broke something? Cool. So the idea is that they have to look at all these slides, they're stained, but they're not stained with colors. Now, I don't know if you know this, but human brain is really bad when it's come to anything that is visual data, okay? If you have to look at all of like the same slide the same day, you will not be able to detect it as good as a machine, okay? So in Parkinson's UK, we'll be thinking for a while, how can we make the detection more accurate? Because a human detection is not as accurate. Computers can do it, right? So we have a lot of standardized data, tons of standardized data, because it's all done by the same staining technologies that are done across other brain banks in the world. Like there's an MS brain bank, and there is an Alzheimer's brain bank. They're all using the same standard of data. So we decided to see what happened if we ask a machine to tell us, is there Parkinson's in the brain or not? So lucky for us in the UK, the NHS doesn't have a lot of money, but they do have an AI lab named Skunkworks. Don't ask me why they call Skunkworks. But the idea of Skunkworks is as follows. They give basically money for a sprint of 6 weeks. So they basically go for a procurement process to hire a company. It's not done in the NHS. And this company basically does a sprint for 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks, you have a proof of concept. So there's a lot of proteins in Parkinson's. We gave this company one protein to look. Don't ask me what. I'm not a neuroscientist, but one. And what they've done, as you can see, is they made, basically they stained it and colored it in order for the computer to understand where are the Parkinson's cells. If I'm not mistaken, it's the big one over there. And they've done it multiple times. Just to let you know, all of our brain bank data cannot be transferred on the cloud. They literally had to go to Imperial College in London and get a massive box full of the data to do, because imaging data is very heavy. And the good news is that by the end of the 6 weeks, we can now detect this protein in 8 minutes in 94% accuracy. And that's what data can do. It's a very simple concept. We don't need the data to do much. We needed it to find one thing. And if you can train a machine to do one thing, it can really help you to understand other stuff. The next steps is to find other proteins and actually to understand better how the brain works, because we still don't know how the brain works. So if it can find one protein, maybe it can now find patterns that we don't know in the brain that will help us to find better cures for Parkinson's. Maybe it will help us to understand how to do better trials for Parkinson's. But also, speaking of economic growth, we can now patent it and basically go to other places that do neuropathology and try to understand how to do that. We already, with AI, by the way, I don't like the name AI, machine learning, we know with X-rays of lungs in COVID to detect COVID. Like, you don't need to have a doctor to tell you. You can actually have a machine and then a doctor to verify it. So machines can do a lot, but we need to give them simple tasks. We can't ask them the whole universe. So I think for this conversation about data, it's really important to know who creates the data. Those creator needs to know what they want to do with the data, create some kind of a business case, and a simple question they want to answer. Answer that question, gets more question after that, but also to have intent. We can't have economic growth by putting data out there and assume that someone will use it. That will not help. But more than that, we need to make sure, we're speaking about infrastructure a lot in this conference, with no data infrastructures, with no standards, with no data culture, with no taxonomies, we cannot create this data use. We cannot move in the world of data just by assuming that someone will use it somehow, somewhere. We need those people to hopefully get the data and use it somehow, somewhere. But first and for all, we need to make good quality data in standards we can actually share to do with everyone. And that's from me. That was it.
Thank you, Ms. Rubinstein, for your insight on this topic. Moving forward, I would like to invite the moderators, Maja Handjiska Trendafilova and Lejla Sadiku, and the panelists, Blerta Thaçi, Bojana Bajic, Sam Denner, and Thomas Kunert.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you, Mor, for this very insightful and very interesting presentation. My name is Lejla Sadiku. I am confirmed, so I'm not to be confirmed. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you today, to be in Pristina, and to be with really people that I'm very much inspired by, and really learn about the experience in the region, what's coming out, what have we been working in, and where's really the potential for a data-driven economy and for data-driven digital economy. So we're going to hear different perspectives, and I'll be co-moderating this panel with Maja, a very dear partner and a dear friend. So Maja, maybe over to you.
Thanks, Lejla, and good afternoon from my side. So really inspired and energized by Mor's address, we will be continuing with the stellar panel that we're having today, that is actually bringing in the perspective on this value, potential, impact of data from various perspectives. We have a private sector perspective, we have a public sector perspective, we have a civil society perspective, so really bringing well-rounded perspective for our audience. My name is Maja Handjiska Trendafilova. I am the director of the Regional School for Public Administration. Particularly happy to be here in Pristina and to contribute by now traditionally to the Digital Summit, which is a unique collaborative platform for digital transformation in our region. We've been also active in the area of digitization, service delivery, open data, etc. So happy to co-moderate this panel. And our main focus is mostly on capacity building and regional exchange among civil servants. So I will be starting with you, Thomas, and actually You are, of course, the Senior Director, Public Services within SAP. In this public service arena for quite a number of years, many different geographies, so you really do have the global insights, working on digitization, transformation of public service, innovation. And let me start by posing the first question. Really, when one thinks about it, governments are among the leaders when it comes to storing of data. And while there is this tremendous public value potential in this data, there are also various risks that loom. And aspects such as proper data handling, data protection, an overall culture of data use, adherence to the standards, rules, guidelines are extremely essential in this. So to start off, it will be great if you can walk us through some positive examples, illustrations globally on the potentials and value of data, but also equally important if you can bring forward to our attention the aspects related to data protection. So I'm stopping here and looking forward for your perspective on this question.
So wonderful. I hope, if I forget anything, you will remind me. Yeah. Okay, what can I bring in? I've been working in the area of public services for over 20 years now for SAP, headquartered in Germany. So in this role, I had the chance to get to know many governments on their way, on their transformation, from manual administrations in the late 90s of the last century to the digital-driven organizations they are today. In the end, I can only highlight, that data is not oil, but you need oil to rig the machine in a positive way. And now just imagine, before we jump into data-driven governments, just imagine what a government would look like without digital information today. It wouldn't even be handled to the most simple things. Let's come to big data. I think over the last 2 decades, we have seen the number of information, of data around the globe growing like crazy. Okay? When we launched, and I will not go into products, you don't need to be scared, right? When we launched our in-memory database HANA in the late years of the noughties, we did some research, and when it came to the point who actually owns data, which industry, then the result was, which is not a surprise, of course, finance. On the second place, including the healthcare sector, we talked about healthcare anyway, okay? The second place was public services. I mean, it is clear, okay? If you look at the government functions, they have data on absolutely everything. Not necessarily in a digital format, but they have. Over the last years, this has changed. I mean, they have collected so many data. There are so many technologies that help you to source data, okay? And this can all be found in governments. Unfortunately, very often in a siloed way, but there is also some development ongoing. And here we come to public value. I mean, what is public value? It is something that helps the government to protect, to serve the citizen better, and to just do their job properly, okay? There are loads of excellent examples how we, in this case, really SAP, because I cannot talk about IBM or Microsoft, okay? We actually did cool projects which really helped, partly even, to let democracy survive, okay? So even already in 2008, we did some project with the Obama administration in the US. You remember the financial crisis, okay? Governments, in the name of the people, in this case the people of the US, they saved banks, bailed out banks for billions of euros. And in the end, in the Rust Belt of the US, people have problems to find jobs. Okay? So what is the chance in data to help the government to justify the expenses and to show the people of America that the money was not given away, just for fun? Because the Obama administration, they wanted to show the money we spent, apart from bailing out banks, is really, to give you jobs back, to create new jobs. And what would you do in 2008? Yeah? You would build some kind of open data model, okay? Because this helped people, to get transparency and insight into the consumption of public money, of their tax money. The good thing was that we actually brought in some kind of an explorer, some kind of a GIS system, and you could drill down, what was the money used for, what project was the money used for, how many jobs were created. So it helped a bit, and with a certain modesty from our side, to protect democracy. We don't know how long this will last, but in 2008 it helped. Other examples where we just said, okay, we help governments to use data to do their job better can be found just a few hundred kilometers up north in Slovenia. So in the early days of the last decade, we helped Slovenia to fight tax fraud, combating fraud and combating the problem of the evasion of social contribution by linking all the cash registers of the restaurants and bars to the Ministry of Finance in real time. Why? Because it was technically possible. Before that, in order to get transparency into what are the invoices they give their clients, etc., you would have to send out teams of auditors. You don't need to do that anymore, okay? Because you have transparency in data. Okay? I could rattle on and on. I know I only have a few minutes. Okay? But I have been too long in this job, to stop.
Don't worry.
But we need to keep in mind is, with the loads of data governments are allowed to collect, comes big responsibility, okay? Because you can use the data always, to do something good, or you can use it for oppression. In the end, for the technology itself, this is all the same, okay? So technology itself is not anything ethical. It is just, it is, okay? If we now say, okay, what can we do? And this is pure technology now, okay? To make sure that data we collect is not abused, okay? Means that we need to change the whole mindset of the organization when it comes to IT development and analytics, open data or something internal. Okay? This means basically you need to learn that you should not lose the trust of your citizens. That means do not over-collect data. Don't create data lakes. Don't go into data lakes and say, okay, let's dig, we will find something. Right? The basic idea of all the projects I have been involved in, was just collect data fit for purpose. So if your purpose is social, then you collect data for social only, okay? And not all the nice flowers left and right of your way, just that. And from this moment on, you say, in the project, you need to have as part of the DNA, and this is loads of cultural change, the idea of how can I protect data. So from the moment you train people for the project, from the moment you start a risk assessment, public or security of data must be part of it, part of the risk assessment. You need to plan security, you need to plan data protection. Right? You need to develop accordingly the tools you develop or the data you collect in your project. And in the end, you need tools to audit it, okay? To report, and then, only then, at least within our company, developing software, only then you get the right to release, right? But this is true for all the projects. And then we come in, and here I need to talk technology for a second again, now to say, okay, therefore you need, of course, the tool set. And so with the technology that is underlying all the applications and analytics and things we do, machine learning, etc., you have a set of things that help you to identify, authenticate, authorize people. You have the chance to do a UI masking, so you only see pseudonyms or asterisks instead of names. You have the chance to anonymize data if you are into analytics. You have security logs, etc. pp. So all this, to make sure that data is not abused and protected properly. Okay? So, and this is my last sentence, or almost my last sentence. We need to accept that data, or the universal data lake, is growing. We need to accept that with that comes potentially high public value. But we also need to keep in mind, whatever we do, okay, that there is a big risk for data abuse, and we need to make it our habit from each and every project on, from the word go on, that we need to keep data protected, especially when it is citizen data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, first of all, for really emphasizing the trust aspect, which is really important, but also for walking us through concrete examples, both you and Mor, because it helps. It helps when one really hears real life illustration. So thank you very much, and we'll continue afterwards. Blerta, we are continuing with you. So Blerta Thaçi, a pleasure. I mean, you're sort of a host here, the executive director of Open Data Kosovo, non-for-profit organization that works on this vision that governance data should be made accessible to all, of course, used, reused. You also work on building the knowledge, awareness, but also the use of data for policy making, decision making, for process optimization. So Blerta, please talk data to us. And of course, open data culture depends on all of us. So maybe how do you assess the journey of opening data in Kosovo and in the region? Is it genuinely embraced or not? So your very well-informed take on the state of play and what worked and maybe where there needs to be an additional push. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome again to Pristina and everyone. Such a pleasure to talk to you today. Yeah, where do I begin in the journey? Open Data Kosovo has been actively working precisely with the public access to information because there we found the most space for improvement. But at the same time, we're also grateful that this space was actually possible. Not many countries, not many governments that are supposedly democratic countries maybe do not actually have that possibility in working so closely as Open Data Kosovo has worked with the government for the past years. Of course, we as an organization, or we like to call ourselves a civic tech because we actually use the technology to make that data accessible. We were very ambitious and very keen on getting our hands into data and actually making that translation for the citizens to understand the meaning of it. But in reality, when we went to these offices with the local or the central level, the officials' willingness to work and to actually create this space we're lacking skills, we're lacking capacities, we're lacking sometimes digital infrastructure. Just recently, we had a really great example of the local level where we were meeting municipalities and they are fully aware of the concept and its benefits of creating this access to information for their citizens. But unfortunately, the government and the country is going through a digital transformation process that maybe is not ideal for the infrastructure needed for the actual concept. So Going into technical details, I guess it's not the module today, but I wanted to, because it's very long, but what I want to emphasize is that along the journey of digital transformation is the journey of human behavior. We have to understand that most of the public officials are going the transition themselves as well, because they're getting equipped with new technologies, with new infrastructure. They're putting one portal and then another portal, and then they're doing double, triple opening data, and then there's lack of some legislation processes like e-signature that's prolonged the process, and then in the end we are sometimes maybe getting just PDF scanned picture data, which is like frustrating for most of the people that need access to information today, and they're writing a story for their company, or they need some decision to make for their career. Some students, they want to know what degree they should take, or businesses, they want to use those data to see how they can improve their services to their client. But we're getting there. In the region, we have a close collaboration with other countries. It's a great way that we're sharing, because we cannot share maybe with other developed countries since they are way ahead of us. But it's nice that in the region we are collaborating and learning from each other in this journey.
Thanks, Blerta. Happy to hear that there is, a progress. Of course, it's a never-ending, I guess, task and endeavor. But as you said, there is a progress. There is even some genuine embracing of the culture. And thanks for also stressing that you are working on leveraging regionally and synergizing and learning from each other. So Bojana, back to you. Bojana Bajic, the head of the IT sector within the Ministry of Finance, so working for a number of years of the supply side, so opening of data of the public administrations, but you've been an ardent contributor to the information society development in Montenegro from the early pioneering processes on information systems, on registers, to the most complex processes such as the electronic identity, interoperability, but also open data. So a wealth of really first-hand experience to bring from the public sector perspective. So Bojana, maybe you can walk us through some of the challenges that you have seen throughout the years in terms of opening of data.
Thank you very much for very great introduce myself. I'm very happy to be here to talk about open data. How it is important for me, my personal card is open data. It is, I'm trying to promote power of open data in my everyday life. As my colleague mentioned before, I'm working in government. I'm working for 30 years in the government, and I know potential data, and I know that we have a very huge amount of data. But I think I had the similar panel 3 years ago on the Digital Summit in Belgrade. We talk about that. We are talking about the open data today, but I can say that we are maybe on the same place. We don't have imagined how to use that huge amount of data on the proper way. Why? We will try to find the answers. Maybe someone from you will have idea to provide to us where we make mistake, because in the Montenegro we become aware that data are very important. Since 2012, I think, we become a part of Open Government Partnership, and we start to create open data culture in Montenegro based on the several blocks. We start with law. We recognize that the law is very important to have the law will provide what is necessary to do every institution to provide their data to the citizen, legal entities, NGOs, SME, etc. We try to present, to promote that our idea to our citizens. We use in mind law on free access of information and put in that law obligation to every institution to provide their data in open data format, in open data standard. They cannot say that open data format is PDF or Word documents. We provide several standards that we said and put in the data and the sub-laws from that law and sub-laws, several standards, GSV, JSON, CVS, XLSX, XML, just to try to provide data in structural form to be possible for reuse for the other institutions. We create, when we prepared all that, we create Open Data Portal. I think that was in 2018, and we start to put data on that portal. But I'm not happy when I say today that on that portal we have from 800 institutions in the government, we have data from 18 institutions. Maybe today we have 20. I shouldn't check before the meeting because we have a problem with IT infrastructure in Montenegro, and that data, I cannot go to that portal to see because it's out of the work. The reason is infrastructure problem. But it is a very small amount of information which we provide to our citizens, and I see that huge potential we cannot use on the right way. You mentioned before Slovenia. In Montenegro, we established the system, electronic fiscalization of all invoices in our country, cash and non-cash, automatic, the receipts from any automat, from a coffee machine, on any machine, all the data we have in our database in tax and custom administration. Amount of data is enormous because there are data about articles, data about quantity, data about prices, data about employees who prepare that bills, and how you just can imagine how it is a huge amount and how we can use it on the many ways. But I see that we are trying to do that now. We are trying to create platform for data analytics, to use that as a big data, but we are still, I think, in the middle of the level of using data on the way how we could do that. I see several challenges how to solve that. And we have the challenges on the right of the public administration and on the side of the users, end users. In the public administration, we prepare data, technically prepare data. We are thinking about their security, protect the data. We try to provide data in open data format, manage data, because it is very important to have it is not, you put some kind of data set, some data set on the portal, but you have to every day change data to be in line with up-to data, which is currently, present current state of that databases. We have to training our data officers. We have to be user-oriented and proactively opening data in the way what is needed to be open. Maybe there are a lot of data which we don't need to open because they are unusable for the others. But I have a message also for the users. I think that all our users have to be aware that they have rights to open data and have rights for open data. If we maybe miss something, if we maybe do something wrong, we have to invite them to push us and to ask for information which they need. They have actively participated in all our working groups, all our meetings, or our laws when we provide some providing of data, and they have to use the data in innovation system there, something to innovate with the data which we are collecting and they can use, and try to push interoperability between the all systems that we have in our information system in Montenegro. And because it is a huge potential when we can make a new value for our small country, because today, as Maja mentioned before, I started with development of the information society in Montenegro with the first computers. I don't know, do anybody remember 286, 386, new computer, old computers, Today, we in Montenegro have electronic identification. Our personal ID cards are with 2 certificates, with electronic identification, electronic signature. We have national interoperability system. We have open data, but we are still sitting and waiting. And I don't know what, but I hope that we will go further and be leader again as we were before. That's my part of.
Thank you, Bojana, really for the inside perspective and really a long-term one. Thanks for stressing that we are still midway from where we want to be, that the number of data sets, etc., are still limited, so there is ample room for improving, but especially for your call or invitation, based on the right to open data, to come forward with ideas on set that can be opened and what can be done more. So thank you very much, and then Lejla, back to you for to initiate the second part.
Thanks, Maja. So I'm listening carefully, and it's great because we have like the beginning of the open data movement in the room. I think globally and regionally as well. I'm just remembering when the open data movement really started. It was very much driven through transparency and anti-corruption, and with the idea that if people had more information, more access to information, they would demand more information, they would ask for more accountability, and ultimately this would lead to more transparent governments. And I think that narrative has changed, and it has changed. I've certainly seen it change in this region a lot, where we've moved away from talking about what it can do for open government and more towards how can we now use data for, what we have here for a digital economy. And I think once you take that out, like once you change that lens, it is no longer anymore about open public data, but what we're talking about is actually all the data that is out there. A lot of it which is not government owned, government controlled, and very often things that government can't even get access to, right? Like we're talking all the Googles and the Facebooks and so on. So this more is for you, because I think you've shown us a little bit. It's like, okay, so there's descriptive analytics, which you can see a lot about portals and what government is doing, but then there's all of this other, maybe more untapped potential on how do you use data for decision making? How do you make actually better decisions through data? How can you do predictions, make sense, and so on? So I'm wondering, hearing what you've heard, what would you say would be the 3 things that not just governments, but also ecosystems, because I look around and I think there's a lot of people here who are not from government, should be investing in if we're thinking about how to have a data-driven economy, if you wish?
Only 3?
Yeah.
Only 3.
Start with 3.
Okay, cool. So I mentioned it earlier, but we discuss a lot about infrastructure of technology, right? 3G, broadband, it's really good. There's a concept named data infrastructure, okay? Standards so we can actually have interoperability, but not only standards that are technological like JSON or Excel or CSV. We also need literally what's in the data, right? So a good example for that is GTFS. Anyone heard about it in the room? GTFS? Public transport data was pushed by Google. I reminded to Lejla today, was basically didn't start by Google, adopted by Google, pushed to governments by Google. Here's an example when a business go in and tell them, can you please tell all of your public transport company to publish data about public transport in this format? And lo and behold, if you go to England and you want to know when the next bus is coming, you just go to Google Maps and you can see it because of GTFS. Probably also in Montenegro you can do the same. If you don't have GTFS? But it's not working, an example, like in sub-Saharan Africa when the transport system is almost not existent. But if you are going into lots of countries in Western Europe or the States, you can actually have GTFS to help you. So that's an example of data infrastructure. What is actually the content of the data that I need? Blerta and Open Data Kosovo working on open contracting initiative that is a standard of what needs to be in procurement. Procurement is a very lengthy process, so it has like 5 different parts of it. But if you know exactly what is the data point, then you can use it, right? So first of all is data infrastructure. That not a lot of people know. Now that you learn, I recommend you to Google it. The second thing is actually looking at what we call data capacity, or the new buzzword for this is like data culture, right? So it's fine that we have tech people coming and do all the data, but if no one in the orgs know what they're doing or understand what is data, then no one will use it. People are afraid. People looking at an Excel spreadsheet and they're afraid. I don't know why. It's like literally cells. But they are afraid. It's because what we've been taught in school, or we're thinking this is only for geeks. Excel is not that hard. Like, I have to admit, it's a beautiful machine, but it's not also useful for anything, for everything. And there are ways of telling stories with data. I also recommend you to go to Lejla's side even later about telling stories with technologies. But you can also tell stories with data. You can explain to people how the data pipeline works, so when they think about their work, they will know where the data is coming in, okay? And to understand what is the maturity of the data, there's a model that started in the UK and also with data.org in the US that is called data maturity model. What are the different parts of the organization and how they work well together? So if only the tech people understand data, then we're failing. We can't create anything, and we need to think about capacity, literacy, making people less afraid so they will use it and will speak to you, right, in the same language. And the third thing is that we need to invest is, I have to put it in, sorry, Lejla, is diversity and inclusion in data. This is a really lovely panel. Most of it is female. Most of the people in the world that use data or like speak about data or do data are not women. Okay, women, transgender, anything, they're like, it's not. It's usually a white North American male world dominated. So if we want to think about how to make data useful for everyone and actually make digital economy better, safer, more inclusive, we need to think about who is not in the room when making decisions about data. And usually, a lot of people are not in the room about it, but also they don't know about it because their data maturity is really low. So I think those are the three things that if we're thinking about digital economy and how to make it better is to try to build the capacity around it, but also understanding that we need infrastructure and we need it nicely, and we need good quality data. A lot of data out there, not in good quality, really hard to do something with data if it's not there. Yeah.
Thanks, Mor. Because we had a bit of a delayed start, so before I posed sort of the last lightning round with main takeaways, I also wanted to bring in the audience, and if you have a certain contribution in terms of data use, we'll be more than happy to pick it up. So please. Okay, before we turn to the audience, is there another question or contribution that you would want to bring in? Yeah. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm putting Edna. I saw you in the audience, and we have not. I mean, set up this. But I know that you also had a great contribution in terms of using of data, in terms of the seed system, and how do our customs also share pre-arrival data that helps in the region the trade and transport facilitation. So this is another practical example on data usage in terms of really helping our CEFTA region in terms of trade facilitation. But because I just saw you, I wanted to bring it in, or in case you want to bring in this perspective. So just asking if there is other question. If not, I will be turning to you on any reflection on this decentralized data. Please, Mor.
I love decentralization because it takes everything out of the big corporation. It makes it easy. I don't think the problem a lot of the time is to access data. Sometimes the data is there, it's just not in good quality. So, and also, if we say decentralized data, how many people know how to access it? Like there is, like I don't think the problem is technology at the moment. The problem is the culture and how we look at data and what we do with it and how we make everyone goes with us. So I used to think that if you are under 30, you probably know how to work with data and you understand it, but it's not true. There's a lot of people who are still very afraid of it. It's not only a young people thing, like to be with data. It's a lot of people are afraid of it still. So I don't think it's the technology. I think it's more about the shift in the brain of when data is useful for you and how, and don't be afraid of it. So yeah, but decentralization in general is a great idea. This is what open data is all about. It's basically saying it's not for me, the government, it's to everyone to use. But if people are afraid, don't know how to ask for it, don't know how to give feedback about it, then we're not going to achieve anything.
Thanks, Mor. So now I will kindly invite you for maybe a brief lightning round in terms of main takeaways that you want our audience to leave the room with, and maybe even touching about the prospects for regional approach and synergies, and also from an investor's perspective, the easiness of investments, not just in one economy. But back to you for the main, let's say, message that you want to convey before we wrap up for today. Please, Thomas, yes.
I am allowed to start. Okay, thank you. Reflecting these points, including the one that was just raised, I would say, A, why are people afraid of data? Because they think they look stupid, because, they look into a CSV and the CSV looks back with the same cleverness, probably. So, with a reference to the Obama dashboard, do you think that the Obama administration would have achieved anything in this endeavor with a CSV file? Or do you think it was a success because each and every citizen, each and every guy around the world was able to access this database via a geo-information system, via very simple diagrams like the ones we saw before? Okay? So, what I'm trying to say is, the really successful, maybe rather cool projects I have seen around the world were all projects where it was not about publishing PDFs and CSV files, but also, okay, do not forget, that this is raw material for startups, okay? But in many, many cases, you had simple tools that helped citizens to understand the information or the data they were provided with. Okay? So this is one of my main points, because I always think, I look at open data and I think, my goodness, how many data scientists do I need? And I'm kind of an expert, okay, to understand these data. And the other thing I would take away from this event is, the name of the event is not Kosovo Summit, okay? It's a summit of some countries exchanging information on digitalization, on digital issues, and we talk about open data. All the countries are not exactly huge, okay? So if I were you, okay, and we do not talk about SAP technologies, okay? So what is really interesting, you want to invest, you want to open a startup. Would it be good enough to have data from Kosovo only? Or wouldn't it be great if you had comparable data, standardized, harmonized, easy to analyze, from the whole region? And when I was invited to this, and also this is a regional thing here, right? Then that was the first thing that came to me. I said, if I was interested in investing here, maybe also as a foreign direct investment, why do I need to harvest data from 6, 7, 10 different countries, which I have to make comparable? I do not have the background of these data. I don't know how valid they are. So the result can only be, with all the due respect, rubbish. Okay? So this is what I would take with me.
Thank you for making this case for the regional approach also very strongly. Bojana, maybe back to you for your takeaway points, and maybe also in reflection to fiscal transparency and opening of data, but back to you for your contribution.
Thank you, Maja. I will just continue with the same messages and the same sentences, because I am working now in Ministry of Finance. As I mentioned before, we established that system of electronic fiscalization, and that huge amount of data helped us to control the data in tax returns, to prepare budget for the next year, to do many, many different things using the data analytics platforms, using the data as a big data. And capacity and types of analysis is enormous. Regarding that, I think that all of us I'm talking from the side of the Ministry of Finance and the side of the finance data. But capacity of the data is huge. All of us have to have in mind that have a right and free access to data for any different area. And feel free to ask institutions to provide the data to us. If we are SME or startups or individuals, just try to create from those data, from the public institution, some additional value. I think it is possible, but just someone have to think about that, to think what of those terabytes data during the day, which we have in our systems, can be used for something new. I'm sure that they can provide some new economic
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bojana, for this, even from the first intervention, inviting and opening approach. So Mor, would you like also for a lightning concluding reflection that will resonate with our audience after leaving the room?
First of all, I want to thank you for being a good government official and asking for it. It's not a given, I know, I work with a lot of them. But the thing that I think it's most important to know is that data is not oil, it's human, okay? It has human context all the time. And unlike what Thomas said, that like we are afraid of saying we don't know, but what makes human really unique, not unique, because also monkeys do that, but we ask questions, like verbally questions. We questioning stuff, we try to do, we're researching, we reach what we reach because we had this instinct of trying to get and do more stuff that is more than a bit of human, right? So every data journey starts with a question, okay? So being humble and actually said, I don't know, I want to question this and see, and make a simple question. The problem that we have as human at the moment is that we try to do basically a lot of problem solving before actually asking a question, which what led us to failure, because we thought we know what the solution is before actually realizing what was the basic question. So I think my main takeaway is data is human, come in human context. Just remember that and be human and kind to yourself and work with it in that environment. Don't think that the machine is smarter than you. At the moment, it's not. Even though some people think that like we created AI that can have, no, it's not. That's it.
Thank you Mor so much. Please, Blerta, for your concluding remarks.
I would just go back to open data. That's where I work mostly. The biggest power of open data is that it can be shared. So it's important because as much as it can be shared, it gets enriched. So a lot of people use this for different perspectives and different ideas that they want to solve. So that's how we can generate more ideas, business ideas, and that's how we can grow the economy of the country. But I am still going to work behind with the government to help get that data out in a standardized format.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I really hope that we have brought a case for the value and impact and potentials of data from these various perspectives, and that you have enjoyed these deliberations, and really thanking all of the panelists for your contributions, and hoping that we continue and enjoy this wonderful program, continuing with the summit. But Lejla, please, back to you.
Well, you closed, but I'm just thinking two takeaways for me. One, I think obviously what's needed is standardization across the region, and this is if the data is to be useful, it needs to come this way. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned, actually I have three things, is around data collaboratives, is how do we bring together different actors who hold different sources of data and actually create the mechanisms in which they can exchange it and use it safely. And the third thing is something that Mor and I discussed in breaks, which is how do we balance privacy and growth. And that's, I think, that is like not yes or no, but it's like it's going to be a spectrum, and I think it will have to be answered over and over again. But thanks to all, it's nice to see everyone, and please, talk to everybody in the breaks.